The stale, dry air of the Nevada desert hung heavy and still, a suffocating blanket woven from dust and the echoes of countless forgotten eons. It was a landscape that whispered secrets to those patient enough to listen, a vast canvas of ochre and rust beneath an indifferent, endless sky. Dawn, usually a spectacle of vibrant hues painting the eastern horizon, was muted today, cloaked in a pervasive, almost unnatural grey. A low, guttural rumble, barely perceptible to the human ear, vibrated through the earth, a sound like distant thunder trapped beneath layers of rock and time, yet no storm clouds gathered. This wasn't the kind of sound one found explained on any meteorological chart or seismic report. It was deeper, older, a primordial tremor that seemed to emanate not from the planet's core, but from its very memory. Dr. Eris Thorne, a man whose life was a meticulous excavation of history's deepest scars, felt it acutely. He stood at the edge of a newly revealed fissure, a jagged tear in the desert floor that had appeared overnight, as if the land itself had exhaled a silent scream. His breath hitched, not from exertion, but from an almost instinctual chill that traced a path down his spine, prickling the hairs on his arms. The silence that followed the faint rumble was even more unsettling, a vacuum that swallowed sounds, making the crunch of his boots on the loose gravel seem obscenely loud. He was alone, as he often preferred to be, surrounded only by the colossal indifference of the landscape and the burgeoning weight of an unspoken premonition. The desert, he knew, held more than just sand and rock. It held narratives, long buried and patiently awaiting resurrection. And something in the chilling stillness told him that today, a chapter he wasn't prepared for, was about to turn. He adjusted the worn brim of his canvas hat, shielding his eyes, which, despite their fatigue, held an almost manic intensity. Aris was a man perpetually on the hunt for the impossible, an archaeologist whose theories often danced on the fringes of academic respectability, much to the chagrin of his more conservative peers at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. He believed in the stories beneath the stories, the echoes of truths too grand or too terrifying for mainstream history to embrace. This fissure, appearing like a wound carved by an unseen hand, felt different. It wasn't the result of a tectonic shift. It bore the hallmarks of something else, something deliberate, perhaps even awakening. A fleeting image flickered through his mind, unbidden and sharp. A symbol he'd only ever seen in fragmented cuneiform texts, a stylized winged disk. It was a symbol associated with the Anunnaki, those enigmatic figures from ancient Sumerian lore, often depicted as divine beings who descended from the heavens. He'd dismissed it countless times as an archaeological curiosity, a relic of ancient mythologies. But now, standing on this trembling earth, the image pulsed with an unsettling new relevance. This wasn't a memory. Not exactly. It was more like a whisper, a gentle push from the subconscious, a forgotten key turning in a lock that he hadn't known existed. A strange metallic tang suddenly filled his mouth, a taste he couldn't quite place, like ozone mixed with something ancient and cold. It made the hairs on his neck stand on end. He shivered despite the rising heat. The world around him, for all its familiar ruggedness, felt subtly altered, stretched thin, as if a veil had been drawn back, revealing not what was hidden, but what was patiently waiting. Nothing, he sensed, would ever be the same after this day. His gaze swept over the jagged edges of the fissure, noting the unusual smoothness of some of the exposed rock faces, as if they had been cut with precision rather than torn by natural forces. He squinted, tracing a peculiar geometric pattern etched into a particularly dark vein of basalt, almost perfectly camouflaged against the naturally occurring striations. It was too regular, too intentional to be a trick of geology. This was a mark, a signature of something artificial, something deliberate, embedded deep within the bedrock. The realization, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift in his understanding, sent a jolt through him. This was not merely a natural phenomenon. This was an entry point. He pulled a small, battered notebook from his cargo vest, the pages filled with his cramped, almost indecipherable script and sketches of forgotten symbols. He began jotting down observations, his pen scratching furiously against the paper. The air grew heavier, thick with an unseen charge, and the distant hum intensified, a low, resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate not just through the ground, but directly into his very bones. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the impending unknown. He knew, with an unsettling certainty, that he was standing on the precipice of a discovery that would either redefine history or redefine him. The world he knew, the one carefully constructed from textbooks and peer-reviewed articles, felt suddenly fragile, perched precariously on the edge of an abyss. He took a deep, shaky breath, the metallic taste still lingering, and prepared to descend. The abyss, he knew, always called back. If this ominous beginning has already made you rethink what you thought you knew about our world, just imagine what's coming next. So go ahead, hit that like button, and subscribe to the channel right now, because here, every video uncovers something few dare to show. The fissure, while appearing haphazard on the surface, revealed a meticulous design as Aris cautiously ventured deeper. The light from his headlamp, a powerful beam cutting through the gloom, illuminated surprisingly smooth, almost polished walls that descended at a consistent angle. It wasn't a natural cave system, nor a simple crack in the earth. This was clearly an entrance, albeit one cleverly disguised and buried beneath millennia of geological shifts and desert sands. He measured the dimensions with a laser rangefinder, the digital display flashing precise figures that only amplified his bewilderment. The tunnel maintained a uniform width of precisely 12 feet, its ceiling an almost perfect arch. Every few yards, he noticed faint, almost imperceptible scorch marks on the rock, as if something of immense power had once carved this path, leaving a subtle, residual heat signature. The air grew cooler with each descending step, losing the desert's oppressive warmth and replacing it with a damp, earthy scent mingled with something else, something sharp and mineral, almost like copper or old iron, but with an underlying sweetness, a smell he couldn't quite place, yet found strangely compelling. He meticulously recorded every detail, sketching the unusual markings and noting the subtle changes in the rock composition. His mind raced, pulling from his vast reservoir of forgotten histories and fringe theories. Could this be one of the fabled sky chambers mentioned in the obscure fragments of the Sumerian king list? Those sections that spoke of rulers descending from heaven and reigning for impossible lengths of time. Mainstream archaeology dismissed these as mythical exaggerations, but Aris had always found their consistency across disparate cultures too compelling to ignore. He reached a section where the walls shimmered with a faint iridescent glow, emanating from thin, crystalline veins embedded within the rock. He touched one tentatively, feeling a subtle vibration, a low hum that resonated directly through his fingertips and up his arm, causing a strange tingling sensation. It was not static electricity. It felt organic, alive, pulsing with a slow, deliberate rhythm. The sensation was not unpleasant, but deeply unnerving, as if the very rock was breathing around him. He pulled his hand back, a tremor running through his body, his mind grappling with the implications. These weren't inert minerals. They were components, perhaps conduits of some ancient, incomprehensible technology. Further down, the passage opened into a vast chamber, far larger than he had anticipated, its ceiling lost in the darkness beyond the reach of his headlamp. The sheer scale of it was breathtaking, overwhelming, making him feel infinitesimally small. The air here was utterly still, devoid of even the faintest draught, yet it held a peculiar pressure, a silent weight that seemed to press down on his chest. It felt like walking into a forgotten mausoleum, a sacred space, undisturbed for an eternity. The ground was perfectly flat, a smooth, dark, obsidian-like surface that reflected his light with an eerie, mirror-like quality. And then he saw it. In the center of the colossal chamber, bathed in the solitary beam of his headlamp, stood a monolith. Not a carved stone, but something that appeared to be forged, immense and impossibly sleek, rising from the polished floor like a silent sentinel. It was at least 30 feet tall, tapering slightly towards a capstone that pulsed with a faint, internal luminescence, a soft, ethereal blue that seemed to breathe in and out. The material was unlike anything he had ever encountered, not rock, not metal, but something in between, dense and dark, absorbing light yet subtly reflecting it. His trained eye immediately recognized the geometric precision, the impossible smoothness of its surface, devoid of any seams or tool marks. It was a testament to engineering beyond human comprehension. He approached cautiously, his boots making no sound on the obsidian-like floor. As he drew nearer, intricate glyphs began to resolve on the monolith's surface, etched with a laser-like precision he couldn't fathom. These weren't cuneiform, nor Egyptian hieroglyphs, nor any known ancient script. Yet, the same stylized winged disc symbol he had glimpsed in his mind earlier was there, prominent and unmistakable, repeating itself in a complex pattern around the base. It was almost identical to the fragmented images he had seen in the oldest Sumerian texts, but here it was complete, perfect, imbued with an undeniable authority. This wasn't merely a decorative symbol, it was a signature, a declaration. A profound sense of awe, tinged with a deep-seated dread, washed over him. This wasn't just an archaeological find, it was a confrontation with the impossible. The symbols seemed to pulse, to shift subtly in his peripheral vision, as if they held an inherent sentience, waiting to be read, to be activated. He felt a faint tremor ripple through the chamber floor, a vibration distinct from the earlier distant hum, this one emanating directly from the monolith itself. The blue light intensified for a fraction of a second, casting strange, elongated shadows that danced like phantoms across the vast emptiness of the chamber. This was Virada 1, the object, the sign, the inscription. It wasn't just a relic, it was a key, changing his perception, opening a door he never knew existed. The real weight of the mystery, however, still remained veiled, a truth too profound to grasp in this initial, overwhelming moment. He knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that he had stumbled upon something that would shatter the foundations of conventional history and plunge him into a reality far stranger and more ancient than any myth. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story has deeply resonated with you. So, empower this content, hit that like button now, and share it with someone who absolutely needs to see this. The monolith stood silent once more, its blue glow receding to a faint thrum, leaving Aris in a stunned, almost paralyzed state. He felt an intense pressure building behind his eyes, a strange cognitive dissonance as his meticulously ordered world began to fray at the edges. Every fiber of his being, every instinct honed by years of academic rigor, screamed for him to document, to analyze, to rationalize. But another, older instinct, one he rarely acknowledged, whispered of reverence, of an unfathomable power slumbering before him. He pulled out a specialized scanner from his pack, a compact device designed to detect anomalous energy signatures and structural irregularities. As he swept it over the monolith, the device immediately screamed, its digital readout flashing wildly, displaying readings that were off the charts, beyond any known material or energy output. It detected not just energy, but an intricate, self-sustaining field, a complex interplay of forces that defied all conventional physics. The very air around the monolith felt charged, shimmering with an unseen energy that made his skin tingle and his teeth ache. He circled the towering structure, his steps slow and deliberate, his eyes scanning every inch of its dark, inscrutable surface. The glyphs, though alien, possessed a strange beauty, a fluid complexity that hinted at a language far more profound than mere symbols. He took countless high-resolution photographs, zoomed in on the intricate carvings, hoping that later, away from the overwhelming presence of the monolith, his analytical mind might begin to unravel their secrets. He felt a strange pull, a subtle mental resonance emanating from the structure, as if it were broadcasting a silent signal directly into his consciousness. It wasn't a voice, but an impression, a sensation of ancient knowledge stirring, waiting to be accessed. He tried to resist, to intellectualize, but the sensation was persistent, a quiet hum behind his thoughts. This was Dr. Aris Thorne, a man driven by a relentless, almost pathological curiosity. He was in his late 40s, his face etched with the lines of countless sleepless nights spent poring over crumbling scrolls and obscure texts. His salt-and-pepper hair was often disheveled, mirroring the organized chaos of his mind. He wore thick-rimmed glasses, often smudged, that did little to hide the keen intelligence and persistent exhaustion in his eyes. He had started his career with a brilliant mind, quickly rising through the ranks, but his unconventional theories, particularly his growing fascination with pre-Diluvian civilizations and possible extraterrestrial influence, had estranged him from the academic mainstream. He was a pariah, respected for his meticulous fieldwork, but dismissed as a dreamer by those who valued dogma over discovery. What he sought was not fame nor fortune, but a deeper truth, a narrative beyond the accepted historical canon. He carried the burden of his grandfather's legacy, a renowned but controversial linguist who had spent his life chasing similar shadows, only to be ridiculed and ostracized. Aris feared ending up the same way, dismissed as a crank, his discoveries buried and forgotten. But a deeper fear gnawed at him, the fear that these ancient stories, these myths, were not just stories, but distorted memories of a terrifying reality. He carried within him a subtle, almost genetic, predisposition to see beyond the ordinary, a legacy passed down through generations of eccentrics and visionaries who dared to question the established order. This hidden chamber, this impossible monolith, was the culmination of everything he had pursued, everything he had doubted, and everything he had secretly hoped was true. His routine was a monotonous cycle of research, fieldwork, and solitary existence. He lived in a small, cluttered apartment near the UNLV campus, surrounded by stacks of books, maps, and artifacts. His only real companions were his theories and the ghosts of past scholars who had dared to think differently. He often walked the desert at night, seeking solace in its vast emptiness, its ancient silence a balm to his restless mind. But even in that silence, he often felt a subtle disquiet, a sense of being observed, a faint echo of the same metallic tang that now filled his mouth in this deep chamber. He tried to forget the dismissive looks from his colleagues, the snide remarks at conferences, the subtle academic punishments that had stunted his career. He tried to forget the ache of loneliness, the feeling of being an outsider looking in at a world too comfortable in its carefully constructed ignorance. A sudden, sharp crack echoed through the chamber, making Aris jump. He spun around, his heart leaping into his throat, his headlamp sweeping wildly across the vast space. It was just a small piece of rock detaching from the ceiling, dislodged by the persistent, subtle vibrations emanating from the monolith. But the sound, amplified by the cavernous acoustics, had been unnerving. He exhaled slowly, trying to calm his racing pulse. It was then, as his light briefly lingered on a shadowed alcove tucked away near the far wall, that he noticed it. A subtle glint, a flash of something reflective, almost metallic, half buried beneath a thin layer of dust and loose scree. His breath caught. His academic training, his years of meticulous observation, took over, pushing aside the fear and awe. This was not the monolithic structure, but something else, something distinct. He made his way to the alcove, his movements more deliberate now, The air here was even colder, prickling his exposed skin. He knelt, carefully brushing away the dust, and revealed a small, intricately carved box. It was made of the same dark, smooth material as the monolith, but inlaid with a series of tiny, glowing crystals that pulsed with a faint, deep violet light. It was no larger than a shoebox, but its presence felt immense, radiating a palpable energy. He reached out, his fingers hovering just above its surface. A wave of intense cold washed over him, followed by a sudden warmth, as if conflicting energies were battling within the box itself. He felt a powerful urge to open it, to see what secrets it held, but also a profound apprehension, a sense that doing so would cross a threshold from which there would be no return. The violet glow from the small box seemed to intensify with Aris's proximity, casting eerie, shifting shadows across his face. He hesitated, his hand trembling slightly above the cool, smooth surface. It was a moment of profound internal conflict, the culmination of a lifetime spent chasing enigmatic fragments of history. His rational mind, the part trained to analyze and observe from a distance, urged caution, to simply document and not disturb. But his deeper, more intuitive self, the part that had led him to these desolate corners of the earth, screamed for engagement, for discovery. This wasn't merely an artifact, it was a connection, a palpable link to the impossible truths he had long suspected. As his fingertips finally brushed the box's surface, a jolt, not of electricity but of pure, concentrated information, surged through him. It was a torrent of images, sounds, and sensations that overwhelmed his senses in an instant. He saw towering structures of unimaginable design rising from verdant plains, heard languages that sounded like celestial music interwoven with the roar of powerful engines, and felt the weight of ancient eyes watching from the depths of space. The predominant image, however, was of a colossal ringed planet, its surface swirling with impossible colors, suspended in a dark, star-dusted void. Nibiru. The name, unbidden, echoed in his mind, clear and distinct, though he had never consciously thought it in that context before. The vision lasted only a fraction of a second, but it left him gasping for air, his head swimming, as if he had just experienced a lifetime of memories that weren't his own. This was the second emotional explosion. It wasn't a memory resurfacing, but a memory implanted, a direct neural interface with an ancient data stream. He stumbled back, clutching his head, his vision blurring, trying to process the sheer volume of information that had just flooded his consciousness. The box, however, remained closed, its violet light now pulsing with a steady, rhythmic beat, as if in silent communication with the monolith. He looked at the towering sentinel in the center of the chamber, then back at the small box, a horrifying realization dawning on him. These were not mere objects. They were interconnected, parts of a system, a network of ancient technology designed to store and transmit knowledge. He sank to his knees, his mind racing, trying to make sense of the overwhelming sensory input. The image of Nibiru, a planet woven into the very fabric of Sumerian mythology, was now terrifyingly real, etched into his mind with an undeniable clarity. The implications were staggering. If Nibiru was real, then the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, were real too. And if they were real, then humanity's entire understanding of its origins, its history, its place in the cosmos, was a carefully constructed lie. This wasn't just about ancient kings, it was about the very fabric of existence. The silence of the chamber, once a source of awe, now felt oppressive, heavy with the weight of untold millennia. Every shadow seemed to deepen, to take on monstrous forms, and the subtle hum emanating from the monolith felt less like a vibration and more like a resonant breath, the slow, deliberate inhale and exhale of something ancient and immensely powerful. He felt utterly alone, yet profoundly watched, as if unseen eyes were observing his every move, anticipating his reactions. The air grew colder, biting at his exposed skin, and the metallic tang from earlier returned, stronger now, almost choking him. He knew he couldn't leave this chamber without understanding more. The world outside, the academic world, would never believe him. His career, already hanging by a thread, would be irrevocably severed. But that no longer mattered. A deeper purpose had taken root within him, a burning need to uncover the full truth, no matter the cost. He carefully reached for the small box again, his fear overridden by an insatiable hunger for knowledge. This time, he didn't touch it immediately. Instead, he pulled out a specialized tablet, a robust, field-grade device designed for deciphering unknown scripts. He pointed its scanner at the box, hoping it could analyze the strange, glowing crystals, or perhaps even identify the language of the glyphs he'd seen. The tablet screen flickered, struggling to process the anomalous energy emanating from the box. Its algorithms, designed for terrestrial languages and known energy signatures, were clearly overwhelmed. But then, after a tense moment of static and flickering pixels, a single, clear image resolved on the screen. It was a three-dimensional holographic projection, rotating slowly in the air above the tablet. The image was of a complex star chart, showing not just the constellations as humans knew them, but additional, impossibly large celestial bodies, and a distinct, elongated elliptical orbit that intersected Earth's solar system at regular colossal intervals. And at the center of that orbit, depicted with a detail that stole his breath away, was Nibiru. The display also showed a timeline, a staggering sequence of dates that stretched back hundreds of thousands of years, far beyond any human record. The timeline highlighted specific periods marked by a flickering symbol, the winged disk. Each marked period corresponded with major evolutionary leaps in human development, sudden technological advancements, and the mysterious disappearances of entire civilizations. The implications slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. The Anunnaki weren't just ancient gods. They were interstellar architects, cosmic gardeners, meticulously cultivating humanity, guiding its evolution, returning at specific junctures, perhaps to harvest something or to reset a grand cosmic experiment. This was Virada II, a greater, more compelling discovery that challenged everything Aris believed. He had found a partial truth, a devastating connection between his world and the world of ancient gods, of cosmic intervention. But the full scope, the true purpose behind their presence, the reason for their visits and their eventual vanishing, remained tantalizingly out of reach, a dark secret lurking just beyond the edge of his comprehension. The tension in the chamber became almost unbearable, a suffocating blanket of revelation and unanswered questions. He gripped the tablet, his knuckles white, his mind reeling from the sheer magnitude of what he was witnessing. The world was not as he knew it. It was merely a stage, set for a drama far grander and more terrifying than any human imagination could conceive. The star chart pulsed with an alien light, illuminating Aris's face with a ghastly, spectral glow. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from the raw, unadulterated shock of the revelation. His carefully constructed reality, built upon academic principles and empirical data, had just imploded, leaving behind a void filled with impossible truths. The Anunnaki weren't myths. They were celestial overseers, their periodic interventions meticulously charted on a timeline that spanned millennia. He zoomed in on the holographic projection, his fingers brushing against the shimmering light, his mind racing to absorb every detail. The star map displayed not only Earth's solar system, but also intricate trajectories of other celestial bodies, some unknown to modern astronomy, all interwoven with the distinct, elongated orbit of Nibiru. The data presented on the tablet was not just visual. It was informational, a subtle stream of raw data that seeped into his consciousness, bypassing his analytical filters. He suddenly understood, with a horrifying clarity, that humanity's entire history was not a spontaneous evolution, but a carefully orchestrated narrative. The sudden bursts of civilization, the inexplicable leaps in technology and knowledge that appeared out of nowhere in ancient Sumeria, Egypt, and the Indus Valley, they were not human achievements. They were interventions, precise adjustments made by an unseen hand, a guiding intelligence from beyond. The feeling was chilling, dehumanizing. Humanity was not the master of its own destiny. It was a project, a carefully nurtured experiment. He felt a sudden, inexplicable anger boil within him, a righteous fury at the deception, at the layers of falsehoods that had shrouded humanity's true origins. But the anger was quickly replaced by a profound sense of helplessness. What could one man do against a truth so vast, so deeply entrenched? Who would believe him? The very institutions he had once dedicated his life to would denounce him, ridicule him, perhaps even silence him. A cold sweat slicked his brow, and he realized the air in the chamber felt heavier, not just with pressure, but with an almost palpable presence. He was no longer just an observer. He was a participant, drawn into a game he barely understood. The hum from the monolith intensified, no longer a distant thrum, but a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through the very bedrock, making his teeth ache. The small box with its violet glow seemed to respond, its pulses quickening, as if it were communicating directly with the towering structure. Aris felt an irresistible urge to touch the monolith, to connect with its ancient knowledge, to understand the true purpose of its presence. He took a hesitant step towards it, his hand outstretched, but then pulled back. A sudden, sharp memory flashed in his mind. His grandfather, Professor Alistair Thorne, pacing his study late at night, whispering about forbidden knowledge, and the ones who watch from the periphery. His grandfather had been consumed by these theories, eventually descending into what his peers called madness. Aris always dismissed it as the tragic endpoint of a brilliant mind, but now he wondered if his grandfather hadn't been mad at all, but simply too close to a truth too vast for the world to bear. He focused back on the tablet, trying to anchor himself in the scientific data, even as that data shredded his understanding of science. The star chart continued to rotate, revealing not just astronomical data, but intricate, interconnected paths, like invisible cosmic highways. These weren't just orbits, they were routes, pathways for travel, perhaps even portals. He zoomed in on a specific section of the timeline, one marked by a sudden drastic drop in human population, coinciding with a particularly close approach of Nibiru. The glyphs associated with this period depicted not only the winged disk, but also a stylized image of a massive flood, a deluge that swept across continents alongside images of advanced craft ascending into the heavens, leaving a devastated world behind. The Great Flood, the mythical cataclysm present in so many ancient cultures, was here, presented as a historical event, directly linked to Nibiru and the Anunnaki's presence. The implications were chilling. If they could orchestrate human evolution, could they also orchestrate its destruction? Were the stories of gods unleashing floods upon defiant humanity not myths, but historical records of population control, of cosmic resets? The thought sent a tremor of profound terror through him. Humanity was not just a project. It was a resource, a variable in a grand experiment, subject to the whims of its creators. He heard a subtle shift in the air, a faint, almost imperceptible sound that seemed to come from directly behind him. He froze, every muscle tensing, his heart hammering against his ribs. He spun around, headlamps sweeping the darkness, but saw nothing. The vast chamber remained empty, save for the monolith and the eerie glow of his tablet. Yet the sensation of being watched intensified, a cold prickle on the back of his neck. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a presence, subtle but undeniable. an awareness of unseen eyes in the shadows. He suddenly realized the metallic tang in the air had grown stronger, accompanied by a faint, almost electrical ozone scent, like the air after a lightning strike. He felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to speak, to utter a word he didn't know, a word that seemed to form on his tongue from a source outside himself. He resisted, fighting against the foreign impulse. What was happening to him? Was the monolith exerting some kind of psychic influence? Was he losing his mind, falling prey to the very delusions that had consumed his grandfather? He squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, trying to regain his composure, to rationalize the irrational. When he opened them again, his gaze fell upon the small, glowing box. Its violet light had taken on a new intensity, and within its crystalline surface, he saw a fleeting image, a brief, shimmering reflection, not of himself, but of a figure standing behind him, tall and slender, its form indistinct, almost translucent, with eyes that glowed with the same violet light as the box. The figure was there for only an instant, then vanished, leaving only the empty darkness in its wake. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story has deeply resonated with you. So empower this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who absolutely needs to see this. Aris stumbled forward, nearly dropping the tablet, his breath catching in his throat. He spun around again, frantically sweeping his headlamp across the dark expanse of the chamber, his eyes wide with a terror he hadn't felt since childhood. The figure, if it had truly been there, was gone. Nothing but the inky blackness remained, swallowing the edges of the colossal space, making it feel impossibly vast and profoundly empty. Yet the distinct impression of a presence, of being observed, lingered like a phantom touch on his skin. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to dislodge the image, to convince himself it was a trick of light, an optical illusion brought on by fatigue and the overwhelming discoveries. But the image, those glowing violet eyes, was burned into his mind with an undeniable clarity. It felt too real, too vivid, to be mere imagination. The metallic tang in the air intensified, making his throat constrict, a cloying, chemical scent that was both alien and strangely familiar. It was like the smell of a machine that had been running for 1,000,000 years, quietly, patiently, waiting for its moment. The hum from the monolith no longer seemed distant or subtle. It resonated directly within his skull, a low, persistent thrum that felt like a frequency being broadcast directly into his brain. He could almost feel his thoughts being rearranged, shifted, as if an external force was subtly recalibrating his perceptions. He pressed his palms against his temples, trying to block out the invading sensation, but it was useless. It was inside him, woven into the very fabric of the air he breathed, the ground he stood upon. He forced himself to take deep, shaky breaths, pushing down the surge of panic. He had to be rational. He was a scientist, an archaeologist. There had to be an explanation, a logical conclusion, even for something as profoundly unsettling as this. But even as he tried to convince himself, a different part of his mind, the part that had seen the star chart, the timeline of interventions, the proof of Nibiru, knew better. Logic had abandoned him the moment he stepped into this chamber. He was no longer in the realm of human understanding. He turned his attention back to the tablet, trying to find solace in the data, in the cold, hard facts it presented. The star chart still rotated, but now a new element had appeared. Overlaying the complex trajectories and the timeline of human development was a series of pulsating nodes spread across different epochs. Each node, when touched, displayed not just a historical event, but a complex data stream, a torrent of information about a specific Anunnaki mission or intervention. He tapped one of the earlier nodes, corresponding to the period when cities first appeared in Mesopotamia. The tablet projected a holographic image of towering pyramidal structures being erected with impossible speed, vast irrigation systems blooming in the desert, and human figures, primitive and awestruck, working under the guidance of much taller, luminous beings who moved with an ethereal grace. These beings were undeniably the Anunnaki, depicted exactly as in the ancient texts, but now rendered with an almost terrifying realism. What struck Aris, however, was not just the technological prowess, but the expression on the faces of the human figures. They weren't just awestruck, they were subservient, almost robotic, moving with a singular purpose, devoid of individual will. And the Anunnaki themselves, while appearing benevolent in their provision of knowledge and technology, held an almost clinical detachment in their glowing eyes. They were not gods dispensing grace. They were geneticists, engineers, overseeing a complex project. The phrase, "the manipulation of history," echoed in his mind, now not a theory, but a demonstrated fact. He felt a profound sense of sorrow, a deep, aching grief for humanity's lost innocence. Everything he had been taught, everything he had believed about human achievement, was a carefully constructed illusion. His ancestors hadn't built those cities themselves. They had been taught to build them, guided by an unseen extraterrestrial hand. We were not masters of our own destiny. We were puppets on a cosmic stage. The thought was unbearable, suffocating. As he pondered this devastating truth, he heard it again. This time, it wasn't a subtle shift, but a distinct, almost rhythmic click, like gears engaging, coming from deep within the walls of the chamber. He looked up, his headlamp scanning the vast, dark ceiling. The faint crystalline veins embedded in the rock, the ones that had vibrated when he touched them earlier, now pulsed with a more visible light. A network of shimmering threads weaving through the basalt. The light was growing, spreading, mapping out intricate patterns across the curved surface of the chamber, revealing glyphs and symbols he hadn't noticed before, hidden in plain sight. And then, a voice. Not a voice from the shadows, but a voice inside his head, clear as if someone was speaking directly to him. It was deep, resonant, ancient, and utterly devoid of human inflection. It spoke in no language he knew, yet he understood it perfectly, intrinsically. "You seek truth, little one. You have found the key, but the door demands a price." The words were not spoken. They were transmitted directly, seamlessly into his consciousness. This was the third emotional explosion. Not a lie discovered, but a secret revealed directly, forcibly, from a source beyond human comprehension. And it came with an implied threat, a chilling warning. He was not just finding secrets, he was being spoken to, chosen. The walls of the chamber, shimmering with their newfound light, now seemed to press in on him, alive, aware. The monolith pulsed with a furious intensity, its blue light casting stark, dancing shadows that seemed to coil and writhe around him like living things. He was caught, trapped in a moment that tore the veil between reality and the impossible. He had found the truth, but the truth, he now realized with sickening clarity, had also found him. Aris fell back, hitting the polished floor with a dull thud, the tablet skittering across the smooth obsidian surface. He gasped for air, his throat tight, his mind reeling from the direct alien communication. The voice, cold and ancient, still echoed within his skull, its words forming a chilling mosaic of dread and revelation. "You seek truth, little one. You have found the key, but the door demands a price." The message was stark, unambiguous, and delivered with an authority that left no room for doubt or questioning. He was no longer just an archaeologist. He was an unwitting participant in a cosmic drama, drawn into something far beyond his understanding. He stared up at the shimmering ceiling, where the crystalline veins now glowed with a vibrant, intricate network of pulsating light, illuminating glyphs and symbols that seemed to writhe and shift with a living energy. It was a language of light, of pure information, weaving across the vastness of the chamber, connecting to the monolith, to the small box, and now, he realized with a sickening certainty, to him. He was a node in their network, a vessel for their knowledge, or perhaps a pawn in their game. He felt a profound sense of helplessness, a realization that his free will, his agency, was an illusion. He was being guided, pushed, drawn into something inevitable, something orchestrated by forces he could barely begin to comprehend. This was Virada 3, the grand point of 60% of the narrative, where Aris perceived he was involved in something much larger than he had imagined. He understood that forces were observing him, entities silently guiding his steps or pushing him toward an inescapable destiny. The story had become darker, deeper, more revealing. He was not merely uncovering history, he was being activated by it. The entire chamber felt like a colossal, ancient machine that had just powered on after millennia of slumber, and he was trapped inside its awakened mechanisms. The metallic scent in the air was now overpowering, a sharp, coppery tang that made his eyes water and his lungs burn. He struggled to his feet, his limbs heavy, his body feeling alien, disconnected. He instinctively reached for his sidearm, a small Glock he usually carried for protection against desert wildlife, but his hand froze. The gun felt utterly useless, a child's toy against the magnitude of what he was facing. This wasn't a threat he could shoot his way out of. This was a confrontation with existence itself, a battle for his very soul. He looked back at the small box, its violet glow now almost blinding, and then at the monolith, which seemed to thrum with a palpable power, radiating waves of concentrated energy that buffeted him like an unseen wind. His internal monologue was a cacophony of fear, awe, and desperate attempts at rationalization. "What are they?" he questioned, the words silent in his mind, yet feeling as if they were being heard. Why now? Why me? The voice in his head, or perhaps merely the imprint of its previous transmission, offered no immediate answers, only a cold, indifferent silence that was more terrifying than any direct threat. He remembered fragmented stories from ancient texts, tales of humans being uplifted, given knowledge, then cast aside when they no longer served a purpose. Was this his fate? To be illuminated, only to be extinguished? He noticed subtle changes in the environment around him. Small pebbles on the floor began to vibrate, dancing in unison with the monolith's hum. Dust motes in the air, caught in the beam of his headlamp, swirled in intricate, almost choreographed patterns. The very air seemed to thicken, taking on a viscous quality, making it harder to breathe. He felt a profound sense of claustrophobia, despite the immense size of the chamber. It was as if the space itself was shrinking, contracting around him, pressing down with the weight of cosmic revelation. His gaze returned to the glyphs on the monolith, now seeming to glow with an inner fire, their intricate patterns shifting, rearranging themselves like a living mosaic. He found himself drawn to them, an irresistible compulsion to touch, to feel, to understand. He knew it was dangerous, that he was opening himself to something unknown, but he couldn't resist. His hand, as if guided by an unseen force, reached out, slowly, deliberately, towards the pulsating surface of the monolith. As his fingers made contact, a searing cold shot through him, followed by an agonizing heat, as if his very molecules were being torn apart and reformed. A cascade of images, far more vivid and overwhelming than the previous one, flooded his mind. He was no longer Aris Thorn standing in a desert chamber. He was everywhere, everywhen. He saw the birth of stars, the swirling nebulae, the vast, cold emptiness between galaxies. He saw Nibiru, not as a distant planet, but as a colossal ark, teeming with life, navigating the cosmic ocean, its ring systems shimmering like a celestial crown. He saw the Anunnaki, not as distant gods, but as biological beings, towering and majestic, their skin a shimmering obsidian. their eyes luminous violet, their forms radiating an aura of immense power and wisdom. He saw them observing Earth, a nascent blue marble, teeming with primordial life. He witnessed their arrival, their descent in colossal, disc-shaped vessels that blazed across the ancient skies. He saw them shaping early hominids, experimenting with DNA, accelerating evolution, planting the seeds of civilization. He saw the construction of ancient wonders, not by human hands, but by their advanced technology. He saw the meticulous record-keeping, the data storage, the careful cultivation of humanity over hundreds of thousands of years. He saw their departures, their returns, their silent assessments. He saw the vanished empire, not as a collapse, but as a deliberate withdrawal, a strategic retreat, leaving behind only echoes and carefully placed triggers. He saw the reason for his own presence here, in this chamber. He was a trigger, a chosen vessel, a point of contact. The sheer volume of information was almost unbearable, threatening to shatter his sanity. His head pounded, his ears rang with the symphony of creation and destruction, his vision blurred with the passage of eons. He felt the weight of cosmic history settling upon his shoulders, a burden too immense for any single human mind to bear. He understood that the entire narrative of humanity was a carefully crafted illusion, a stage play for an audience of cosmic architects. And now, the play was entering its final act, and he was no longer just an audience member. He was being called to the stage. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story has deeply resonated with you. So, empower this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who absolutely needs to see this. The torrent of information, the overwhelming psychic download from the monolith finally receded, leaving Aris gasping for breath, slumped against the ancient thrumming surface. His body felt heavy, bruised, as if he'd been dragged across continents and through eons. His mind, however, was no longer his own. It was a vast, sprawling landscape of alien knowledge, interwoven with his own memories, creating a terrifying tapestry of cosmic truth. The world, as he had known it, was utterly annihilated, replaced by a devastating, undeniable reality. He now knew the Anunnaki. He knew Nibiru. He knew the truth of humanity's genesis. His personal sense of self was fractured, fragmented. He was Aris Thorn, archaeologist, but he was also a conduit, a vessel. The metallic tang in the air had intensified to an almost unbearable level, and the humming from the monolith now seemed to synchronize with his own heartbeat, a deep, resonant thrum that filled every cell of his body. He felt a profound sense of despair, a crushing realization of humanity's insignificance in the grand cosmic scheme. We were not children of Earth, but products of an alien laboratory, our purpose defined by beings who saw us as little more than a biological experiment. The fear, however, quickly mutated into a cold, hard resolve. He had been chosen. He had been given this knowledge. He would not simply buckle under its weight. He had to act. But how? What could he, a solitary academic, do against a truth that spanned galaxies and millennia? The weight of this new understanding pressed down on him, suffocating him with its magnitude. He remembered the cold, detached eyes of the Anunnaki in his vision, their clinical efficiency, their profound lack of human empathy. They weren't evil, not in a human sense. They were simply beyond judgment, beyond good and evil, operating on a scale incomprehensible to humanity. He became acutely aware of the shimmering network of light on the chamber ceiling, those crystalline veins now throbbing with a vibrant violet luminescence. They weren't just decorative. They were actively transmitting energy, pulsing with a deep, resonant rhythm that resonated through his bones. He realized with a chill that the entire chamber was not just a tomb, but a dormant communication array, a colossal beacon waiting for its activation. And he, by making contact with the monolith, had just provided that activation. He was the switch. A low, guttural growl, almost imperceptible, emanated from deep within the walls, a sound like grinding stone mixed with something biological, something alive and ancient, stirring from a profound slumber. The sound intensified, echoing through the vast space, making the very air tremble. He looked around, his headlamp sweeping frantically, but saw no source. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, from the bedrock beneath his feet and the unseen depths above. It was a sound of immense power awakening, of something truly vast preparing to stretch. Then a symbol appeared, projected onto the obsidian floor directly in front of him. It wasn't static. It shimmered, pulsed, and reformed, a complex geometric sigil made of pure light. It was an abstract representation of the winged disk, but intricately interwoven with other symbols he now understood. The trajectories of Nibiru, the double helix of DNA, the cyclical nature of time itself. As he stared at it, the symbol began to expand, to grow, radiating outwards across the polished floor, forming a vast, intricate mandala of light and energy. The center of the mandala began to sink, to ripple, like water disturbed by an unseen force. This was the fourth emotional explosion. A symbol appearing in the wrong place, an object awakening on its own. It was not a vision, not a memory, but a direct, physical manifestation of the awakening ancient technology. The ground beneath his feet was no longer solid. It was transforming, becoming something else. He felt a profound sense of disorientation, of reality itself beginning to fray around him. He instinctively knew what was happening. A portal was opening. The chamber, once a tomb, was now a gateway, a bridge between worlds, between dimensions, between epochs. He scrambled back, away from the expanding light, his mind screaming in protest, even as a part of him felt a strange, detached fascination. The edges of the light ripple pulsed faster, its colors deepening from violet to a profound, inky black, a void that seemed to swallow the light of his headlamp. The air grew colder, far beyond the chilling temperature of the underground chamber, an almost absolute zero, making the metallic tang in the air feel like ice in his lungs. He could hear a low sucking sound, like a colossal vacuum, drawing the very air out of the chamber, distorting the acoustics, twisting the sound of his own ragged breathing into something alien and unnatural. And then, from the heart of the black void, from the epicenter of the shimmering symbol, a shape began to emerge. Slowly, deliberately, it coalesced from the darkness, a form that defied geometry and human understanding. It was not entirely solid, nor entirely spectral, but something in between, a shimmering distortion in the fabric of space. It was immense, far larger than any human, its form vaguely humanoid but impossibly elongated, slender, almost ethereal. Its skin was the color of deep space, absorbing light, yet its eyes, two luminous points in the shifting darkness, glowed with an intense violet light, the exact same hue as the crystals in the small box. The creature stepped through the swirling void, its form rippling like heat haze over asphalt, yet utterly corporeal. It was majestic and terrifying, an entity that seemed to defy the very laws of physics, its presence utterly dominating the vast chamber. Iris, paralyzed by a primal fear that rooted him to the spot, could only stare, his mind struggling to categorize what his eyes beheld. This was not a being of flesh and blood as he understood it. It was a construct of pure energy and light, encased in a shimmering obsidian-like shell that absorbed and refracted the faint illumination of the chamber. Its limbs were impossibly long and graceful, ending in slender, multi-jointed digits that seemed more akin to tendrils than fingers. Its head, held high, was elongated and devoid of conventional features, save for the two piercing violet eyes that seemed to gaze not at him, but through him, into the very depths of his soul. The being was silent, yet its presence was a cacophony of sensation. The cold, the metallic scent, the thrumming resonance that intensified to a deafening roar within his skull. It moved with an unnerving slowness, its every motion imbued with an ancient, deliberate power, an almost ritualistic grace. Aris felt an overwhelming sense of insignificance, of being a speck of dust in the presence of a cosmic titan. This was an Anunnaki, not from fragmented texts or ancient carvings, but real, alive, and standing before him, a living fragment of a vanished empire, brought back by his unwitting touch. This was Virada IV. The protagonist had access to a devastating truth. He was finally seeing what was truly hidden, an ancient Anunnaki presence, not just a symbol or an artifact, but a sentient, living being. This was the instant where he finally saw the impossible, the truly alien, the architect of humanity. The revelation was immense, intense, and utterly cinematic, yet it still left something greater, something even more profound, pending. The final revelation, the ultimate truth, was still beyond this terrifying, awe-inspiring encounter. The Anunnaki raised one of its elongated hands, its movement slow and deliberate, and pointed a single, slender digit directly at Aris. No words were spoken, yet a wave of pure information, of ancient, unadulterated knowledge, flooded his mind once more. This wasn't a vision, it was a memory, imprinted directly into his consciousness, not his memory, but theirs. He saw the colossal arc of Nibiru, a world ship traversing the cosmos, a self-sustaining ecosystem of advanced beings. He witnessed their desperate flight from a dying star system, their arduous journey across countless light years, searching for a new home, a new source of vital resources. He saw their arrival in Earth's solar system, a system teeming with primitive life, yet rich in the minerals and elements they desperately needed, particularly gold, essential for repairing their atmospheric degradation on Nibiru. He saw their genetic experiments, the slow, painstaking process of uplifting primitive hominids, creating a subservient workforce, an intelligent species designed to mine and serve. He saw the birth of humanity, not from a divine spark, but from a calculated genetic manipulation, a hybridization of Anunnaki DNA and Homo erectus, designed for resilience, for intelligence, and crucially, for obedience. He felt the weight of their decisions, the cold logic of their species' survival pitted against the nascent, fragile existence of humanity. He saw their internal conflicts, the debates among their ruling council about the fate of their creation, the moments of surprising empathy from some, the utter disdain from others. He witnessed their departure, the vanishing, not as an abandonment, but as a temporary retreat, a cycle tied to Nibiru's elliptical orbit, a strategic withdrawal to allow humanity to develop further, to propagate, to become self-sufficient, all while leaving behind triggers and guidance systems. The monolith, the box, the ancient texts, to ensure their eventual return would be seamless. The Anunnaki before him lowered its hand, its glowing eyes unwavering, and the torrent of memories subsided, leaving Aris emotionally drained, physically weak, yet profoundly changed. He was no longer just a scientist, he was a living archive, a receptacle of forbidden knowledge. The immense weight of this truth, the true origin of humanity, pressed down on him with crushing force. Every human ambition, every historical milestone, every spiritual belief system was suddenly revealed as a carefully curated narrative, a story designed to manage and control a species unaware of its true lineage. The entity shifted its stance, its form rippling subtly, and Aris felt a new wave of sensation, not of memory but of raw, unadulterated warning. It was a sense of urgency, of impending cycles, of a grand cosmic clock nearing its final chiming. The Anunnaki had left, but they had always intended to return, and the signs, the triggers, the ancient tombs of their vanished empire were now awakening. signaling the imminent conclusion of a millennia-long experiment. He was not just witnessing a revelation, he was part of its herald. The air crackled with a palpable energy, and the metallic tang felt like a taste of the future, cold and inevitable. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story has deeply resonated with you. So empower this content, hit that like button now and share it with someone who absolutely needs to see this. The Anunnaki's gaze intensified, those luminous violet eyes boring into Aris, not with malice, but with a cold, almost surgical intensity. He felt utterly exposed, his deepest fears and most fleeting thoughts laid bare before this ancient, colossal intellect. The silent communication that followed was not a torrent of images, but a single crystalline thought, a direct imprint on his consciousness. The cycle is complete. We return. It was a statement, not a threat, utterly devoid of emotion, yet carrying the weight of cosmic inevitability. The implication was terrifyingly clear. Humanity's probation was over. The experiment was reaching its conclusion. The creators were returning to assess their creation. Eris felt a fresh wave of panic, a desperate urge to scream, to warn, to somehow halt the relentless march of this ancient destiny. But the words caught in his throat, suffocated by the overwhelming presence of the entity before him. His own human voice felt weak, utterly inadequate against the silent roar of cosmic purpose. The Anunnaki then turned its head, its elongated form shifting, and its gaze fell upon the monolith, which pulsed with renewed vigor, its blue light flaring. The entire chamber seemed to hum in response, the crystalline veins in the ceiling shimmering with a violent intensity, echoing the violet light in the Anunnaki's eyes. It was as if the ancient being was interfacing directly with the colossal machine, initiating a sequence, a protocol slumbering for millennia. Aris felt the ground beneath him tremble, not with the distant rumbles from earlier, but with a deep, pervasive vibration that resonated through the very structure of the chamber, a foundational shudder. He realized with a sickening clarity that this was not merely a tomb, but a control center, a communication hub left behind by the Anunnaki. And he, Aris Thorn, a humble archaeologist, had unwittingly activated it, waking its silent sentinel and triggering the beacon for its long-absent masters. He was not just an observer, he was the final piece in their ancient puzzle, the unwitting catalyst for their return. The weight of this realization was almost unbearable, a crushing responsibility that threatened to shatter his sanity. The Anunnaki then began to slowly recede, its form shimmering and blurring, dissolving back into the black void from which it had emerged. The portal in the floor, the expanding mandala of light, seemed to pull the entity back into itself, a reverse birth, swallowing it into the abyss. As the last vestiges of its form vanished, the black void began to shrink, contracting inwards, drawing the ethereal cold and the metallic tang with it. The overwhelming hum in his skull lessened, replaced by a dull, persistent ache. But as the portal began to close, a final, chilling sensation washed over Aris. It wasn't a vision or a message, but a palpable feeling of profound disappointment, a deep, pervasive sorrow that was not his own, but seemed to emanate from the departing entity itself. It was a silent lament, a sense of regret for what humanity had become, or perhaps for what it had failed to become. The Anunnaki, despite their detached clinicality, seemed to harbor a subtle, underlying melancholy for their creation, a silent acknowledgement of a grand experiment that had perhaps not yielded the desired results. He stumbled forward, his legs shaking, and collapsed to his knees as the portal finally snapped shut, leaving behind only the obsidian-like floor, smooth and unbroken, save for the faint, residual shimmer of light that lingered for a few moments before fading into the encompassing darkness. The chamber was silent once more, but it was a different kind of silence now, a pregnant, waiting silence, charged with the echoes of cosmic revelation and the promise of an imminent return. The crystalline veins in the ceiling continued to pulse, but now with a slower, more deliberate rhythm, like a heart settling into a new, terrifying beat. His head pounded, his body ached, and his mind felt like a chaotic storm of information, alien memories, and human despair. He was no longer just an individual, he was a vessel, filled with a truth too vast and too dangerous for the world. He understood now the true meaning of the vanished empire. It wasn't vanished at all. It was merely dormant, waiting for the right time, for the right trigger, for the cycle to come full circle. And Aris Thorn, the ridiculed archaeologist, had become that trigger. He dragged himself over to the small box, its violet glow now muted, its energy field diminished. He picked it up, feeling its cool, smooth surface against his trembling fingers. It felt inert now, its purpose fulfilled. He stared at the monolith, its blue light now a steady, unwavering beacon in the center of the chamber. It was no longer just an artifact. It was a testament, a monument to a truth that would shatter civilizations. He had always sought to uncover the hidden narratives, the forgotten histories. Now he was not just a discoverer. He was an inheritor, burdened with the knowledge that could either save or destroy his species. A sudden, overwhelming wave of fatigue washed over him, a profound exhaustion that seeped into his bones, clouding his vision. He fought against it, trying to remain conscious, trying to process, to plan. But it was too strong, a deliberate sedative, perhaps an echo of the Anunnaki's final, subtle influence, designed to ensure he would process their truth slowly, carefully, before he could act. His eyelids fluttered, heavy as lead. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the steady, unwavering blue light of the monolith, a silent sentinel standing guard over a reawakened secret. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story has deeply resonated with you. So empower this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who absolutely needs to see this. Aris awoke with a gasp, his body stiff and aching, his head throbbing with a dull, persistent pain. For a moment he was disoriented, unsure of where he was, the vivid dreams of cosmic travel and alien beings blurring with reality. Then the memory slammed into him, a brutal, overwhelming wave of truth. The Anunnaki, Nibiru, humanity's origins, the silent communication, the portal, the metallic tang, though now faint, still lingered in the air, a phantom taste of the impossible. He was still in the chamber, lying on the obsidian floor, the small, violet glowing box clutched in his hand. The monolith still pulsed with its steady blue light, a beacon in the vast, silent cavern. He pushed himself up, his muscles protesting, every movement a struggle. He felt profoundly changed, as if the very atoms of his being had been rearranged. The knowledge he now carried was a heavy burden, a constant buzzing presence in his mind. He looked at his hands, ordinary, human hands, yet they felt foreign, imbued with a power or understanding that was not truly his own. He was no longer just Aris Thorn. He was a living library of Anunnaki truth, a walking testament to humanity's alien genesis. The immediate sense of danger had subsided, replaced by a profound, pervasive sense of dread. The Anunnaki had left, but their message, "The cycle is complete, we return," echoed in his mind with chilling clarity. What did that mean for humanity? Were they coming to reclaim their creation, to judge it, to reset the experiment once more? He looked around the chamber, its vastness now seeming less awe-inspiring and more oppressive, a monument to a truth that mankind was utterly unprepared to face. He pulled out his tablet, surprisingly still functioning, its screen still displaying the holographic star chart, but now overlaid with new, flashing data points. These points showed projections, calculations of Nibiru's trajectory, its next approach to Earth's solar system. The numbers blurred into a terrifying countdown. It wasn't centuries away, nor millennia. It was decades, perhaps even less. The return was imminent, a cosmic appointment etched in the stars, driven by cycles beyond human comprehension. He had to get this information out. He had to warn someone. But who? His university colleagues would dismiss him, brand him insane. The government, they would likely seize him, study him, silence him, fearing the global panic such a revelation would cause. He was alone with a truth that could shatter civilization, and he knew, with a sinking heart, that revealing it openly would likely lead to chaos and destruction, far more immediate than the Anunnaki's eventual return. The sheer scale of the lie, the depth of the manipulation, would unravel every societal structure, every religious belief, every scientific theory. It would be an existential cataclysm. His mind raced, a frantic search for a solution, a way to deliver this truth without unleashing an apocalypse. He looked down at the small box in his hand. Its violet glow had returned, faint but steady, and he felt a subtle hum emanating from it, a resonance that echoed the one within his own mind. He realized it wasn't just a data storage device. It was a key, perhaps even a smaller, portable version of the monolith's interface. He stared at the complex glyphs etched into its surface, now understanding their intricate meaning, their purpose. They were not just symbols, they were commands, directives, instructions for interaction. He lifted the box, holding it steady, and focused his intent. He felt a profound mental connection, a seamless interface between his consciousness and the ancient technology. He wasn't just touching it, he was thinking through it. A new holographic projection shimmered above the box, not a star chart, but a complex three-dimensional blueprint of the chamber itself, along with intricate schematics of its hidden mechanisms. He saw dormant energy conduits, communication arrays, even defensive systems, all integrated into the bedrock, all waiting for activation. This was not merely a passive repository, it was an active station, capable of incredible feats of engineering and communication. He could feel the power latent within the chamber, a vast, untapped energy source pulsing beneath the obsidian floor. The crystalline veins in the ceiling flared in response to his mental interaction with the box, their violet light dancing with newfound intensity. He could, he realized, activate the entire complex. He could broadcast the Anunnaki's message to the world. He could send out a warning. But that warning, he knew, would be met with disbelief, panic, and potentially the very chaos he sought to avoid. He considered his options, the terrible weight of decision pressing down on him. Should he expose the truth, even if it meant societal collapse? Or should he try to find a different path, a way to prepare humanity, subtly, gradually, for the inevitable? The latter seemed impossible, given the scale of the deception and the deeply ingrained narratives of human history. The former felt like an act of profound irresponsibility, perhaps even an act of self-destruction. He was trapped between two impossible choices, each fraught with unimaginable consequences. Then, a flicker of an idea, born not of fear, but of his archaeologist's instinct for preservation, for understanding. He couldn't broadcast a message that would shatter the world, but he could preserve the knowledge. He could use this station, this ancient Anunnaki control hub, to store and transmit a different kind of message, one not of panic, but of preparation, of a gradual unveiling. He could create an archive, a hidden vault of truth, accessible only to those who were truly ready, those who dared to look beyond the veil. He could become the guardian of this knowledge, preparing the way for humanity's eventual awakening, rather than forcing it upon an unprepared world. It was a perilous, solitary path, but it was the only one that offered a semblance of hope, a chance for humanity to survive the coming return, not as unknowing subjects, but as informed, albeit terrified, participants. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story has deeply resonated with you. So, empower this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who absolutely needs to see this. Eris felt a strange calm settle over him, a clear, decisive clarity that cut through the fear and confusion. He knew what he had to do. He would not unleash this truth upon an unsuspecting world in a fit of panic, for chaos would achieve nothing but humanity's self-destruction. Instead, he would become a quiet sentinel, a hidden librarian of cosmic truth, using the Anunnaki's own technology to prepare humanity for their inevitable return. It was a monumental task, one that would consume the rest of his life, but it was the only path that offered a sliver of hope. He focused on the small box, his mind now attuned to its intricate workings. The holographic blueprint of the chamber shimmered, responding to his intent. He began to activate dormant systems, channeling power through the crystalline veins in the ceiling, turning the entire cavern into a vast, silent processing unit. The hum from the monolith intensified once more, resonating with a deeper, more profound frequency, as if the entire structure was now awake, fully operational. The metallic tang in the air sharpened, but now it felt less like a threat and more like the clean, sterile scent of a supercomputer working at full capacity. He commanded the system to create an encrypted data vault, hidden within the very bedrock of the chamber, accessible only through a complex sequence of his own devising, intertwined with the Anunnaki glyphs he now understood. This vault would contain everything: the star charts, the timeline of interventions, the genetic blueprints of humanity, the messages from the Anunnaki, the chilling revelation of Nibiru's trajectory. It would be a time capsule of truth, buried not just in the earth, but in the very fabric of an alien legacy, waiting for the right minds to discover it. His fingers, guided by an unseen intelligence, moved across the glowing surface of the box, inputting complex commands, weaving human encryption with alien protocols. He felt a profound connection to the ancient engineers who had designed this system, a kinship across millennia and galaxies. They had left behind the tools for humanity's subjugation, but he would repurpose them for humanity's salvation. It was a monumental act of defiance, a quiet rebellion against a cosmic destiny. As he worked, a new sense of purpose filled him, replacing the crushing despair. He was no longer a victim of circumstances, nor a pawn in an alien game. He was a bridge, a translator, a guardian. The responsibility was immense, terrifying, but also empowering. He was protecting humanity's future, not by force but by truth, delivered at the opportune moment. He felt the subtle vibrations of the chamber, a rhythmic pulse that permeated the bedrock, a testament to the immense power now coursing through the ancient network. The blue light of the monolith flickered, then stabilized, glowing with an unwavering intensity, while the crystalline veins on the ceiling hummed with a soft, violet luminescence, a silent testament to the processing power now at his command. The entire space felt alive, breathing with an ancient alien consciousness, now partially under his control. The last piece of his task was to create a subtle beacon, a faint, almost imperceptible signal embedded within the Earth's natural magnetic field, a whisper in the cosmic winds. This signal would contain a fragment of the truth, a tantalizing hint, designed to draw only the most curious, the most open-minded, the most courageous minds towards this hidden chamber, but only when the time was right, only when humanity was truly ready. It would be a gradual evolutionary approach to awakening, rather than a sudden catastrophic one. He would leave clues, breadcrumbs for future generations, scholars who, like him, dared to look beyond the accepted narratives. He finished his work, exhausted but resolute. The chamber, now a fully operational communication and data storage facility, settled into a quiet hum, its immense power dormant but ready. He looked at the monolith, its silent guardian presence now imbued with a new meaning. It was no longer just a relic of alien gods. It was a promise, a challenge, a testament to humanity's resilience. He understood now the true meaning of the tombs of ancient Anunnaki rulers. They were not just burial sites. They were dormant control centers, waiting for the cycle to complete, for the empire to reawaken. He packed his gear, the small box carefully secured, its violet glow now a comforting presence, a silent companion. He knew his life would never be the same. He couldn't go back to his old academic life, to the comfortable lies and convenient dismissals. He was now bound to this secret, to this chamber, to this truth. He would spend his remaining years living a double life, outwardly an eccentric archaeologist, inwardly a guardian of cosmic truth, preparing for the day the Anunnaki would return. He was ready to face them, not as an ignorant subject, but as a knowing, albeit terrified, heir to their silent legacy. As he turned to leave the chamber, his eyes scanned the vast space one last time. The air, though still charged, felt less oppressive, less threatening. The metallic tang had mellowed, taking on a subtle, almost sweet undertone. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, a solemn vow made in the heart of this alien tomb. He would not fail humanity. He would ensure that when the vanished empire finally returned, humanity would not be caught unaware. He would light the path, one subtle clue at a time, towards a future where humanity might finally stand on its own, not as mere creations, but as conscious participants in the cosmic drama. If this profound journey has opened your mind, comment below, "I saw what he saw." This helps us understand who is truly seeking knowledge beyond the surface. Like this video, subscribe to the channel right now and hit that notification bell, because the next episodes will delve even deeper into the cosmos. And don't leave without clicking the next video. It's the continuation of this essential quest. Eris Thorn began his slow, deliberate ascent back into the waking world, leaving the profound silence and ancient power of the chamber behind. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from physical exertion, but from the immense weight of the knowledge he carried. The fissure entrance, once a menacing maw, now seemed like a temporary portal, a fleeting glimpse into a reality that still awaited its full unveiling. The desert dawn, which had been muted and grey, was now painting the sky with streaks of fiery orange and deep purple, a beautiful, violent burst of color that seemed to mock the quiet, cosmic dread he felt within. He reached the surface, blinking against the sudden brightness, the dry desert wind, a sharp contrast to the still, charged air of the underworld. The world above seemed utterly oblivious, bathed in the mundane light of another day. Cars zipped by on a distant highway, oblivious to the ancient secrets stirring beneath their feet. Planes traced white lines across the vast blue canvas, carrying passengers dreaming ordinary dreams, untouched by the cosmic truths now housed within Aris's mind. He looked out across the seemingly endless expanse of the Nevada desert, a landscape that had once symbolized barrenness and forgotten histories, but now represented a crucible where humanity's true fate was being forged. His life, he knew, was now irrevocably altered. He was no longer just an academic, but a guardian of a truth too vast for the world to comprehend. He would continue his work, outwardly pursuing his archaeological theories, publishing his papers, maintaining the facade of a respectable, if eccentric, scholar. But inwardly, he would be building an invisible ark of knowledge, laying down subtle clues, crafting a hidden narrative that would slowly, patiently, prepare humanity for its greatest reckoning. He would become the keeper of the Anunnaki's legacy, not as a servant, but as a silent, defiant resistor, ensuring that when the vanished empire truly returned, humanity would not be caught entirely unawares. He picked up a handful of desert sand, letting it sift through his fingers, feeling the coarse grains against his skin. This seemingly insignificant act was imbued with new meaning. Each grain of sand, each rock, each ancient dust particle held within it the silent echoes of millennia, of cosmic cycles, of alien presence. The earth itself was a living artifact, a testament to a history far stranger and more profound than any textbook dared to imagine. He understood now that human history was merely a thin veneer, a fragile narrative built upon the colossal foundations of an ancient, alien truth. Eris turned, his gaze sweeping across the vast horizon, a silent promise forming in his mind. He would not scream the truth from the rooftops, for that would only lead to chaos. Instead, he would weave it into the fabric of his work, subtly, meticulously, guiding those with open minds towards the inevitable realization. He would plant the seeds of doubt, nourish the hunger for deeper understanding, and provide the keys to the hidden vault in the chamber below. He would be a catalyst for a gradual awakening rather than a harbinger of instant destruction. He felt the small, violet glowing box nestled securely in his vest, a direct link to the impossible, a constant reminder of his solemn vow. It was a fragment of the Anunnaki's legacy, a tool of their vanished empire, now repurposed for humanity's quiet defiance. He began his solitary walk back to his battered SUV, the rising sun casting his long shadow before him, a silhouette of a man burdened by cosmic knowledge, yet paradoxically empowered by it. The journey back was not just a return to civilization. It was the beginning of a new mission, a silent crusade against ignorance and oblivion. The world slept, dreaming its ordinary dreams, unaware of the ancient gears that had just begun to turn, of the cosmic clock, now ticking towards its final, inevitable chime. The Anunnaki, the rulers from Nibiru, had indeed vanished. But their empire, far from being truly gone, had merely entered a dormant phase, waiting for the cycle to complete. And now, thanks to Eris Thorn, a hidden guardian was ready, waiting too. For in the end, the greatest truth is not found in what is revealed, but in what is left unsaid, lingering in the shadows, waiting for humanity to finally open its eyes. What will you do now that you've glimpsed the truth he saw? Will you look away, or will you dare to ask what truly lies beyond the veil? The desert whispers secrets, and some secrets once heard can never be forgotten.